It's Friday afternoon. Your paycheck just hit. For about 6 minutes, you feel ahead. You open your banking app and it says $4,782. And for a second, you think, okay, this month might be different. Then the math starts. Rent's due on the 1st, $1,850. Car payment auto drafts Monday, $412. Insurance, $168. Student loan, $287. Groceries last week were $146 at Target, and somehow that was just a quick run, right? Gas is $52 a tank now. Your credit card minimum is $193, but the statement balance is closer to $2,400. Nothing crazy, no Vegas weekend, no designer splurge, just normal life. And by Sunday night, that $4,782 doesn't feel like progress anymore. It feels temporary. So what does it actually take to get ahead? To not just survive, but build real wealth in America right now? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people who feel behind aren't irresponsible. They're just operating below a few specific money numbers that quietly decide everything. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Welcome to Ben's Money Milestones, where late starters build real wealth, where working Americans learn the money psychology that actually matters. Okay, so just quickly before we get into this, let's be clear about something. This isn't about grinding harder. It's not about cutting coffee. It's not about wanting it more. This is about math. There are basically 4 numbers that determine whether you'll ever build meaningful wealth in the U.S. economy. Not your job title, not your hustle, not your intentions. Your savings rate, your liquidity buffer, your asset composition, and your margin between income and fixed costs. Let's start with the one nobody calculates. The average U.S. personal savings rate right now hovers around 4 to 5%. That means for every dollar people take home after taxes, they're saving about 4 cents. Median household income in America is roughly $75,000 to $80,000 after taxes. That might be $4,800 a month. At a 5% savings rate, you're putting away about $240 per month. Now here's where it quietly breaks. Financial planners say long-term wealth typically requires saving 15 to 20% of income. On that same $4,800 take-home, that's closer to $720 to $960 per month. That gap, roughly $500 to $700 a month, is the difference between compounding and coasting. Over 10 years at a modest 7% return, that gap can mean over $100,000 in difference. Not because you're smarter, not because you invest better, just because the percentage changed. And look, don't get me wrong. If you're making $4,800 a month and your rent alone is $1,850, pushing your savings rate to 20% feels almost insulting. I get that. But math doesn't care about feelings. It only responds to margins. And this is where the system part comes in. In 1985, the median home price in America was about 3 times median household income. Today, it's closer to 5 to 6 times income nationally, and much higher in metro areas. Healthcare costs have outpaced wage growth for decades. Childcare in many cities rivals a second mortgage. College tuition exploded. Meanwhile, wage growth has been steady but not explosive. So when people say, just save more, what they're really ignoring is that fixed costs have eaten the margin that used to make higher savings rates possible. This isn't a discipline problem. It's a compression problem. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. Meet Marcus. He's 34, lives in Phoenix, makes $78,000 a year. That's solid. After taxes and 401k contributions, he takes home about $4,900 a month. Rent for his 1-bedroom, $1,700. Car payment and insurance combined, $620. Utilities and internet, $240. Groceries, around $600 lately. Student loans, $350. Phone, subscriptions, gym, another $180. Before he does anything fun, he's at roughly $3,690 in fixed and semi-fixed costs. That leaves about $1,200. On paper, that's great, right? But here's what the budget spreadsheet doesn't show. His car needed new brakes, $780. He flew home for Thanksgiving, $420. Dental work not fully covered, $1,100. Friend's wedding gift and travel, $650. Over the course of a year, that $1,200 monthly surplus shrinks fast. In reality, Marcus saves around $400 to $500 consistently. That's about 8 to 10%. Better than average, still below the compounding threshold. And here's what it actually feels like. Constant low-level vigilance, checking balances before swiping, hesitating before booking trips, mentally calculating every purchase. Not broke, but not secure. That psychological state matters. Behavioral research shows that when your financial margin is thin, your brain shifts into scarcity mode. You avoid risk, even good risk. You delay investing because volatility feels dangerous. You stay in jobs you dislike because the paycheck feels safer than possibility. This is why wealthy people behave differently. Not because they're morally superior, but because their margin allows different decisions. Look at how Berkshire Hathaway approaches cash. Warren Buffett keeps tens of billions of dollars in cash equivalents, not because he doesn't know how to invest, but because liquidity gives him optionality. When markets crash, he can move. Scale that down. When you have $500 in savings, you can't take career risks. When you have $5,000, you can start considering them. When you have $30,000, you negotiate differently. It's the same principle, just a different scale. And that brings us to the second number. Liquidity. The median American household has under $10,000 in checking and savings combined. Nearly half of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency without debt. Think about that. If one car repair, one medical copay, one job disruption sends you into credit card at 24% APR, you're not operating from stability. You're operating from fragility. And fragility changes behavior. Meet Danielle and Chris. Dual income household in Ohio. Combined income $110,000. After taxes, about $6,800 per month. Mortgage, property taxes and insurance, $2,100. 2 car payments and insurance, $1,050. Childcare, $1,200. Groceries, $900. Utilities, phones, streaming, $350. Health insurance premiums deducted from their paycheck, but $5,000 deductible hanging over them. They have about $1,200 to $1,500 left each month in theory. But with a toddler, something always comes up. They currently have $6,200 in savings, which sounds decent until you realize 3 months of essential expenses for them is closer to $18,000. So every decision is cautious. They don't increase 401k contributions because, what if? They don't switch jobs because, what if? They don't invest extra because, what if? This is where the psychology flips. There are basically 3 liquidity milestones that change behavior. Around $1,000, you stop panicking at small shocks. Around $10,000, you feel breathing room. Around $25,000 to $30,000, you stop negotiating from fear. Most Americans never cross that third line. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Even if you hit those savings numbers, the third money metric still decides everything. Asset composition. The median U.S. net worth is under $200,000, but most of that is home equity and retirement accounts. Home equity looks good on Zillow, but you can't buy groceries with Zillow estimates. Retirement accounts are powerful, but penalties and taxes lock them up for decades. That means many middle-class families are equity-rich and option-poor. Wealthy families structure assets differently. They hold appreciating assets, yes, but they also prioritize liquidity and income-producing investments that generate cash flow now, not just net worth later. Again, not because they're smarter, because they understand that wealth is about optionality, not just valuation. And here's the myth we're told. Just invest early and often. That's incomplete advice, because the real skill isn't starting to invest. It's staying invested when life punches you in the face. You can't write out market volatility if you need your cash next month. You can't think long-term if your emergency fund is 2 weeks thick. So the sequence matters. First, margin. Second, liquidity. Third, consistent investing. Reverse the order and stress eats the strategy. And zoom out for a second. This isn't just about rent or car payments. It's about how margins shape behavior, how liquidity shapes courage, how asset structure shapes freedom. The system didn't evolve for today's cost structure. Incentives favor institutions. Debt is easy to access. Asset inflation benefits those who already own assets. Meanwhile, most Americans are told the problem is lattes. That's gaslighting. So what can you actually control? You can't fix housing prices overnight. You can't reverse inflation. But you can measure the numbers that actually matter. What was your real savings rate last month? Not what you hope. What was it? How many months could you survive without income today? What percentage of your income is locked into fixed costs, rent, car, insurance, before you make a decision? Start there. You don't need to fix all of it at once. If your savings rate is 5%, maybe the first milestone is 8%. If you have $2,000 saved, maybe the next line is $5,000. If fixed costs eat 70% of your income, maybe the long-term move is reducing that ratio, even if it takes years. Small math shifts compound. And here's the part that should actually feel relieving. If you've been feeling behind, anxious, or stuck despite doing everything right, it's probably not a character flaw. It's that you're operating below the thresholds that change behavior. Once you cross certain numbers, decisions feel lighter, risk feels manageable, investing feels sustainable. Wealth isn't built on motivation, it's built on margin. The system works best for people who understand those numbers and structure their lives around them. It traps people who never get taught them, not because they're lazy, because the math was never explained. And once you understand it, you move differently. Take care, my friend.